After studying this module, you shall be able to know about how the Indian Fiscal Federation operates, understand the nature of fiscal federalism, assess the various relations between center and states, analyze the role of constitution in federalism, assess the recent issues in Indian fiscal federalism.
The Government of India, as per the Constitution of India, is the governing authority of a federal union of 29 states and 7 union territories. The Government of India is based on a tier system in which the Constitution of India delineates the subjects on which each tier of government has executive powers. The Constitution originally provided for a two-tier system of government: the Union Government, also known as the central government, representing the Union of India, and the state governments. Later, a third tier was added in the form of panchayats and municipalities.
The term federalism originates from the Latin word fidus, meaning treaty or covenant. A federal state is one where some free states are bound together by an agreement. Federalism is a system of government of a country where a federal or central or union government and several state governments exist simultaneously as contrasted with a unitary state. Under this system, power is allocated between the central and state governments such that each has authority in their independent spheres but maintain cooperation and coordination in the interest of the nation. Fiscal federalism is concerned with understanding which functions and instruments are best centralized and which best placed in the sphere of decentralized levels of government. In other words, it is the study of how competencies, expenditure side, and fiscal instruments, revenue side, are allocated across different vertical layers of the administration. An important part of its subject matter is the system of transfer payments or grants by which a central government shares its revenues with lower levels of government. Federal governments use this power to enforce national rules and standards. Fiscal federalism is a general normative framework for assignment of functions to the different levels of government and appropriate fiscal instruments for carrying out these functions. Let us analyze the nature of fiscal federalism, and for that, we need to understand relations between center and states. There are three relations that exist between the center and states: 1. Legislative relations, 2. Administrative relations, 3. Financial relations. Legislative relations. The Indian Constitution divides legislative authority between the Union and the states in three lists: 1. Union list, 2. State list, 3. Concurrent list. The Union list consists of 99 items on which the Union Parliament has exclusive authority to frame laws. Items included in the list relate to foreign affairs, defense, communications, foreign trade, posts and telegraph, etc. The state list consists of 61 subjects on which ordinarily the states alone can make laws. Items included in the list relate to police, administration of justice, prisons, agriculture, local governments, etc. The concurrent list comprises of 52 items. Items included in the list relate to criminal and civil procedure, marriage and divorce, economic and special planning, trade unions, electricity, newspapers, books, education, etc. Both Union Parliament and state legislatures can make laws on subjects given in the concurrent list, but the centre has a prior and supreme claim to legislate on current subjects. In case of conflict between the Union law and law of a state on a subject in the concurrent list, law of the Parliament prevails. Residuary powers rest with the Union government. The Parliament can also legislate on subjects in the state list if the Rajya Sabha passes a resolution by two-third majority that it is necessary to do so in the national interest. During times of emergency, Parliament can make laws on subjects in the state list. Under Article 356, Parliament can take over the legislative authority of the state in case of failure of constitutional machinery in the state. Parliament can legislate on state subjects for the implementation of international treaties or agreements. Parliament can make laws on subjects in the state list if two or more states make a joint request to it to do so. These provisions allow the center to enjoy more extensive powers than the states. Administrative relations. The Indian Constitution is based on the principle that the executive power is coextensive with legislative power, which means that the union executive or the state executive can deal with all matters on which the parliament or the state legislature can legislate. The center can issue directives to the state to ensure compliance with the laws made by the parliament for construction and maintenance of the means of communications declared to be of national or military importance, on the measures to be adopted for protection of the railways, for the welfare of the scheduled tribes, and for providing facilities for instruction in mother tongue at primary stage to linguistic minorities. The center acquires control over states through All India services, grants and aid, and the fact that the Parliament can alone adjudicate in interstate river disputes during a proclamation of national emergency as well as emergency due to the failure of constitutional machinery in a state, the union government assumes all the executive powers of the state. Let us now discuss the financial relations between center and the states. The Indian Constitution has provided independent sources of revenue to both the Union government and the states. While Union Parliament can levy taxes on the subjects included in the Union list, states can levy taxes on the subjects in the state list. Ordinarily, there are no taxes on the subjects in the concurrent list. However, the states are greatly dependent on the center for finances to meet their ever increasing developmental expenditures. The center can exercise control over state finances through the Comptroller and Auditor General of India and grants in aid. During any financial emergency, the President has the power to suspend provisions regarding division of taxes between the center and the states. Article 280 of the Constitution allows for the formation of a Finance Commission by the President once in every 5 years for making recommendations about distribution of net proceeds of the taxes between the center and the states and principles governing grants and aid.
According to the Article 356 of the Constitution of India, states must exercise their executive power in compliance with the laws made by the central government. Article 357 calls upon every state not to obstruct the executive power of the union within the states. The Article 352 to 360 contain provisions which empowers the center to take over the executive powers of the states on issue of national security or on the breakdown of the constitutional machinery. Governors are appointed by the central government to oversee states. The President can dissolve the state assembly under the recommendations of the Council of Ministers by invoking Article 356. If and when states fail to comply with the provisions of the Constitution, the Constitution provides that, except in a few cases, union law prevails upon state law. If any provision of a law made by the legislature of a state is repugnant to any provision of a law made by Parliament, which Parliament is competent to enact, or to any provision of an existing law with respect to one of the matters enumerated in the concurrent list, then the law made by the Parliament, whether passed before or after the law made by the legislature of such a state, or as the case may be, the existing law shall prevail, and the law made by the legislature of a state shall, to the extent of repugnancy, be void. There is an exception to this in cases where a law made by the legislature of a state with respect to one of the matters enumerated in the concurrent list contains any provision repugnant to the provisions of an earlier law made by Parliament or an existing law with respect to the matter, then the law so made by the legislature of such state shall, if it has been reserved for the consideration of the President and has received his assent, prevail in that state, provided that nothing in this clause shall prevent Parliament from enacting at any time any law with respect to the same matter, including a law adding to, amending, varying, or repealing the law so made by the legislature of the state.
Now we will try to understand the concept of cooperative and organic federalism. Cooperative federalism exists where the units or states and center do not compete for power but cooperate through various instruments to promote the common purpose. The present stage in India can also be described as organic federalism, where everyone functions as a part of one organism to achieve the common governmental purposes. The Indian Constitution provides for a number of mechanisms to promote cooperative federalism. Article 263 empowers the President to establish interstate council to promote better coordination between the center and states. Interstate council is headed by the Prime Minister and includes six cabinet ministers of the Union and chief ministers of all the states and union territories. To ensure greater cooperation among states in the field of planning and other matters of national importance, zonal councils are set up under the State Reorganization Act 1956. The State Reorganization Act divided the country into six zones and provided a zonal council in each zone. Each council consists of the chief minister and two other ministers of each of the states in the zone and the administrator in the case of union territory. The Union Home Minister is nominated to be the common chairman of all the zonal councils. However, the Indian Federation has been envisioned with a strong centre as the framers of the Indian Constitution were aware that there were widespread economic disparities among several areas of India due to diversity and its huge size. According to Article 1 of the Constitution, India is a union of states and consequently the existence of federal structure of governance for this union of states becomes a basic structure of the Union of India.
A distinguishing aspect of Indian federalism is that, unlike many other forms of federalism, it is asymmetric. Article 370 makes special provisions for the state of Jammu and Kashmir as per its instrument of accession. Article 371 makes special provisions for the states of Andhra Pradesh, Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, Goa, Mizoram, Manipur, Nagaland, and Sikkim as per their accession or statehood deals. Also, one more aspect of an Indian federalism is the system of president's rule, in which the central government, through its appointed governor, takes control of the state's administration for certain months when no party can form a government in the state or there is a violent disturbance in the concerned state. Although the constitution does not say so, India is now a multilingual federation. India has a multi-party system with political commitments frequently based on linguistic, regional, and caste identities, necessitating coalition politics, especially at the union level.
Let us discuss the role of the Constitution. A federal system derives its existence from the Constitution. Every power, executive, legislature, or judicial, whether it belongs to the center or to the component states, is subordinated to and controlled by the Constitution. So, in order to be workable and stable, everything must be precisely defined by a written instrument. The Constitution should be binding on the center and state governments. Neither of the governments should be in a position to override the provisions of the Constitution relating to the power and status which each is to enjoy. The Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land, must also be rigid. In a rigid Constitution, the procedure of amendment is very complicated and difficult. This does not mean that the Constitution should be legally unalterable. The Indian Constitution has some more distinctive features as compared to other federal constitutions. Indian Constitution does not provide dual citizenship as there is a dual polity with single citizenship. There is no state citizenship. Every Indian has the same rights of citizenship no matter in which state he resides. Unlike USA, in India, states have no power to make their own constitution. There is a common constitution that must be adhered to by both the center and the states. In normal times, the Indian constitution is framed to work as a federal system, but in times of war and other national emergencies, it is designed to work as if it were unitary. The Indian Constitution does not set up the states as rivals to one another or to the Union. All are expected to work harmoniously in their own areas without disturbance by others. However, there is provision of an overriding power of the Union when it is necessary in the public interest. Let us discuss the recent issues in Indian fiscal federalism. Federalism is not a static but a dynamic concept, as it is always in the process of evolution and requires constant adjustments from time to time in the light of the contemporary needs. Constant discussions and negotiations between the center and states in various forms can help in removing friction and difficulties in the areas of intergovernment cooperation. Given the era of coalition governments at the center and also in many states, fiscal federalism assumes a greater significance. However, its very essence is being eroded. There is a need for greater fiscal federalism as central governments are finding it difficult to meet all the competing needs of various constituencies and are attempting to build local capacity by delegating responsibilities to the state governments. Central governments are dependent on state governments to assist them in implementing economic development strategies. State governments are demanding more autonomy and taxation powers to meet their expenditure responsibility. The center plays a significant role in the economy by correcting instances of market failure, ensuring equitable distribution of income, maintaining macroeconomic stability at full employment, and controlling inflation. Market failures can be corrected by providing public goods, and as these depend on local inputs and needs, these should be under the state purview. So, there is a need for coordination between central and state governments. Over the years, there have been many issues of states' power to utilize available fiscal instruments on the revenue side at a time when their expenditure policies are heavily influenced by central plan and transfer of central funds to the states. Moreover, by announcing several centrally sponsored schemes, the center has systematically eroded fiscal autonomy of states, and state governments are forced to bear some significant portion of their costs. As state governments are getting more burdened with their fiscal responsibilities, centrally sponsored schemes should be entirely funded by the central government. This will result in state governments' willingness to undertake better implementation of such schemes. On many issues, the center should restrict itself to policy making and leave implementation to states as they are in a better position to understand local social welfare needs. The center is bound to collect certain taxes on behalf of the states and must share a substantial portion with the state governments. But while deciding taxation, the center does not discuss all relevant tax related issues with the states. Over time, the proportion of plan assistance to states from the center has reduced hugely and now is just about 10% of total outlays from around 60% earlier. Over time, the autonomy of Finance Commission has been considerably eroded, largely due to political economy of center-state fiscal relations. The center determines the terms of reference of finance commissions and interprets their recommendations to suit its own needs. Finance commissions are compelled to first determine the requirements of the central government, including budgetary support to the central plan, leaving little for distributing among the states. There have been issues where state governments were denied their legitimate share of revenues on account of political differences with the center. Actually, state governments are much more competent than the center to undertake provisioning of most public goods whose needs are local in nature. So, they should have commensurate power to raise revenue and get a larger share of tax and non-tax revenues from the center as non-plan expenditure.
Finally, it is important for us to analyze what are the disadvantages of federalism. First, the conflict of authority. Sharing of power between the center and the states includes both advantages and disadvantages of a federal organization. Sometimes there can be overlapping of work and subsequent confusion regarding who is responsible for what. Further, this can lead to corruption also. Federal system of government is very expensive as more people are elected to office both at the state and at the center level than necessary. Thus, it is often said that Only rich countries can afford it. Too many elected representatives with overlapping roles may also lead to corruption. Further, it pitches the state versus state. Federalism leads to unnecessary competition between different regions. There can be a rebellion by a regional government against the national government too. Both scenarios pose a threat to the country's integrity. However, investment friendly competitive federalism attracts investments from different sources and can promote healthy growth and development through employment generation. Next, the uneven distribution of wealth. It promotes regional inequalities, natural resources, industries, employment opportunities differ from region to region. Hence, earnings and wealth are unevenly distributed. Rich states offer more opportunities and benefits to its citizens than the poor states. Thus, the gap between the rich and the poor states widens. It promotes regionalism. It can make state governments selfish and concerned only about their own region's progress. They can formulate policies which might be detrimental to other regions. For example, pollution from a province which is promoting industrialization in a big way can affect another region which depends solely on agriculture and causes crop damage. Let us now summarize what we have learned in this module. The system of government in India can best be described as quasi-federal in nature, in as much as it is both federal and unitary. It can be considered federal because of the distribution of powers between the center and states, and it may be considered unitary because of the retention of union control over certain state matters, and also because of the constitutional provisions relating to emergencies when all powers of a state would revert to the center. For making Indian federalism more robust and viable system, differences between the center and the state must be sorted out amicably to allow for successfully meeting the great challenges of diversity, external and internal security, and socio-economic development.